This is episode 35 of Give Me a Chance, and it is your host speaking, Vittoria. Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Give Me a Chance. To wish you a very Merry Christmas, this time we have an extra long episode ready for you, our little gift to all of you. This week, Lynne will tell her story and how she got the chance to change her life by escaping a dangerous family situation and giving herself and her children a better future. Here is Lynne. Hi Lynne, welcome to Give Me a Chance. How are you?
I am so excited to talk with you. What fun this is. I mean, It's not always a fun subject, but what a joy to be able to share this with you and listeners all over the place.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that we have this connection, two of us. I'm so glad that we got introduced to one another. And
yes, we need to publicly thank Waltz for introducing us.
I know, our friend Waltz. So thank you, Waltz. Yes, absolutely. Because Lynne, you went on a podcast of Waltz, right? A few weeks ago.
Kitchen Table, yeah.
And indeed, I think we're going to talk about recipes later on also.
I hope so.
About food. But most of all, about all the struggles and the strength you've shown in your life. Before we start, I mean, who am I talking to?
I am a grandma from California, actually technically from Pasadena, California, which I don't know, some people have heard of Pasadena.
Most probably.
And now here I am talking with you, V, and sharing these stories that are universal in so many ways. And mine may be sort of American in that what you and I were talking about was, I told you that I married a man that I didn't probably know well enough, but it was such a typical story, 1970s, early 1970s. And here he was, a tall, great looking, outgoing guy in a three-piece suit. You know, he was a banker, and I was impressed with his vitality. And in that time, really all I wanted to do with my life was be married and have a family, have children. And he wanted that. And so within a matter of months, we were married, and I was on my way to having my first child, and thrilled, and he seemed thrilled, and I was living at the time in North Carolina, very different culture from the California where I grew up, and so there were things that were just kind of common and accepted that were a little different than what I grew up with. But hey, you know, and you're in your 20s and you're young and everything is wonderful, and
indeed, I think it's kind of a relatable situation for so many women at the same age.
So many women,
of course.
And also, I have to say, I think even though I had been to college and I had been working for some time and had been out in the professional world, I was so naive. I had never in my parents were quiet folks. I had not been abused as a kid. My dad never raised his voice. I had never really seen alcoholism up close. Okay. And there were a lot of things I just didn't experience in my life before I went out in the world. He began some behaviors that I was uncomfortable with. I was like, okay, is this normal? Is this not normal? Second child came along. Things began to, because as many of you may know already, nothing stresses a marriage, particularly a new marriage, like a child. This is, so not only are you now having perhaps a new life with a partner, but now you introduce this other human being to it. And
you're responsible for that. You have to take care of that. So you see probably some other sides.
And it is so physically demanding on top of being emotionally and mentally demanding. And back in the 70s, it was when people, first of all, most of the doctors that were your obstetricians were men. And so what happened was you had a baby and you were handed the baby and they said, okay, bye-bye, good luck. I was living out in the country, a place I didn't have family around. I didn't have close girlfriends.
How did you do it on your own? I mean, you had your husband.
How did I do it on my own? How do we do these things on our own. And when I think back, I think part of it, I wanted to do it. I was so thrilled to be having these children. This was what I wanted to do with my life. So I kind of threw myself completely in it. But as I was doing that, I was watching my husband change and disintegrate kind of in front of my eyes.
Did you get any signs, some subtle signs of something that was changing?
Well, I think they weren't really so subtle, but I grew up with that idea that men were men and they did what men did. And here was this guy. And what I wasn't putting together was that he had been a Marine, a combat Marine in Vietnam. And at this time, when they came home from combat, changed their clothes on the plane, got off the plane, and wanted to leave it all behind, because many of us were protesting the war. It was not a popular war. We were a divided country then, as we still are in many ways. But these guys who had fought in the jungle, who had gone over as kids, 18, 19-year-old kids, been given drugs, booze, weapons, and told to go and kill people.
Kill people. Yeah, exactly.
So, and there's a word, I think you and I talked a little bit about this. It's called, it's two words. It's moral injury. I think we have over the years ignored the fact that on top of the physical strain and the mental stress that these guys and women in many cases went through, there is the moral injury that they carry with them. And so here was this guy that looked normal and kind of talked sort of normal.
Yeah.
But I would see him he would come home with a new car. He would come home with a new animal. He would disappear for days at a time. He would drink too much, and in the South at that time, that was like, well, that's what men do,
That's normal. Yeah, you just condone it.
Yeah. But when you become a parent, when you have these small children, all of a sudden your world changes, your view changes, and everything is through the lens of these children and what's okay and what's not okay.
Yeah.
And our money situation got kind of crazy. I didn't know what he was doing. I couldn't get him to tell me what was going on. And I had clients from my previous work calling me saying, would you do some freelance work? And so I began to take some freelance work just because I thought, I don't know where our money is coming from at this point.
Oh, and what kind of job did you do at the time? Because
I had my first job in advertising in 1966 in an advertising agency.
Wow.
And that was, I had done different kinds of things. I had been an art director and a production artist. I did some voice work. Wow. And then I was kind of working my way up and was writing and kind of an associate creative or something. And then I got married. And so that was...
Your career, you just built up. And then, you were really creative. But indeed, how does such a creative and passionate person...
Back in that day, as women, we didn't plan careers. There was no career to be had. There was nothing out there that was waiting for us. This was our belief. There were a few of us, very few of us who kind of I'm the same age roughly as Hillary Clinton, for example. And certainly she was someone who was doing things and thinking things that many women were not back in the time. But for most of us, it was still when job searches were help wanted men and help wanted women. It was assumed that we were not going to go after the same jobs. So it was so deeply embedded in our brains that...
What kind of places were meant for you as a woman in the 60s?
I first started out doing the work that for creative people that was okay for women to do, which was art, direction, fashion, and so on. But then it sort of crept over. And I'll finish that up in a while. But meanwhile, here I am. My clients, a uniform company that called me and said, could you do this?
Okay.
fashion. So this was a thing that I could do, and you moms out there will identify with this, because I would put my kids to bed at 8 o'clock at night, and then I would put myself to bed at the same time, and I would sleep for 4 hours and get up at 2 a.m. and work all night.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And then I would get the kids up in the morning, put them in the car, and go see my clients and deliver the work. They didn't care what I looked like, or what, as long as I brought them the work, and the work was what they wanted. So I just found a way that I could survive, which so many of us do.
And what did your husband think about your job?
He didn't think a lot about anything but himself. I was beginning to understand.
Yeah.
Because he was kind of descending into this mental hell.
Yeah.
And he struggled to keep himself going forward. And of course, he had sort of jobs going on that he bought a factory at one point. And I was just watching this stuff happen, and I knew he was not okay, but I could, his family, I couldn't get them to see that there was something seriously wrong, because they just saw him as this hero, and I was the strange one from California. So, understandable with families. And so third child came along, and happily, but by the time I was expecting her, I knew that I was in deep, deep trouble with my children, and that I was going to have to do something, but I didn't know what. And, you're just as a new parent with little one, you're so, every day is a challenge, just getting people fed and clothed and trying to do the work that you're doing. And it was my sister on the phone from California who said, I don't care, just leave. You have to leave now. Because I would tell her what he'd done and what had happened. And, he drank too much and took the little one out on the tractor, and, these crazy things. And I knew that we would be injured, we would be killed. And he was saying things. There's self-hatred that comes with this moral injury that I couldn't understand. I couldn't, and these things weren't being discussed back in the day. I mean, the idea of mental illness, this was a thing for weak people, or, other not young, handsome people. And for anyone who doesn't know, the reality is that more of these people who fought for us have died by their own hand than ever died in combat. Still, these vets are my age, and they're still dying every day from suicide.
And sometimes in the pain and the weight of what they have seen, they've gone through, it's way too much.
Yes.
But when your sister came into play, or at least she tried to find a way for you, how?
Well, she was in California, so what could she do? But she said to me, I don't care how. She said, get on a train, get on up, do whatever you have to do, say whatever you have to do or say, and get the kids out of there. Just get out. And I had dogs and cats and horses by this time, and so I told him a story about going to visit my sister.
Okay, with the kids.
And we got on a train. The four of us. They were 2, 3, and 4. They were each carrying their little bag. I was carrying a bag. I left my dog, my animals, my cat, my place, and said goodbye, and had no idea what was going to happen. But I knew we wouldn't live if we stayed. We had to go. So I got on the train, and I went to see, I had gotten in touch with a girlfriend who was in Chicago, and I said, we're going to be there on the train. And so she was there to meet us, dear friend from college. on the train, and we took showers and we ate and we cried, and then she put me back on the train, which for some reason it's always stuck with me. It's called the California Zephyr, the train that goes from Chicago to California to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I love trains. My granddad was a train guy, and yeah, so I just had a thing about a train, and that seemed like a welcoming thing. And so the kids were, they were game the way kids are. It's like, well, mom's doing it, so we're doing it, so we're okay. And I don't know what I told them. I probably just said, we're going to go see your Aunt Joan, my sister, and off we went. And we came into Reno, Nevada, just as the sun was about to go up. And Reno is an interesting place. It's high desert. And you look at the Sierra Nevada mountains of California that are usually snow covered most of the year. It's beautiful. And I thought, okay, I'm close. And the train takes off and goes up the Sierra Nevada mountains, and we reach the crest of the hill.
Wow.
And I stood between, this is one of the memories that I have of it. I stood between the train cars. And I don't know if you can still do that, but in that day you could. And I stood and looked at the spine of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and all of a sudden a kid comes riding up on a horse next to the train, waving and riding that horse. And I thought, okay, I'm home. I'm going to make it. We're going to be all right. And so that's a beautiful, happy memory that I have of that time, feeling like that was kind of a sign, that
it's a symbolic
symbol of my Western upbringing, and always loved horses. And so we arrived, and my sister picked us up. So we lived in a camping trailer in her driveway for weeks.
And how did you actually relate to your children this way? I mean, you had left their father, their figure that they knew in the life.
But I didn't tell him that. And he had not, been a day-to-day presence. I was the day-to-day presence.
Okay.
He would disappear and then show up. And of course they loved him. And I always told them, and by the way, all of you parents, when you separate, if you have to, my kids never heard anything from me about their dad, except that he loved them, that he maybe wasn't well, that he was struggling, but he loved them, which he did in his way.
And what about yourself? How did you think about your own self in relation to what you had just done?
Interesting question. I'm not sure I was thinking about my own self. You're so wrapped up in that kind of a moment with doing what you need to do. At least I was. I was determined, that my kids were going to be okay. I was determined that I was going to be okay because I knew they needed me. So there was no luxury of whining or crying, it was just, okay, we're marching on, we're going, we're doing. And my sister and her husband were helpful and loving, and also, here's the interesting part, thinking back, angels on my shoulder. They were involved in the technology movement very early. They were both engineers. And so one of the first things that my sister did was to sit me down at her brand new Apple II computer, which nobody had.
Wow. Okay.
And say, this is going to be survival for you. This is how you're going to be okay with these kids.
Yeah.
Put your hands on these keys. I was like, wait, no, I can't. It's a computer. It's just, I don't. He said, no, shut up. Put your hands on the big sister, right? Put your hands on the keys and just do this right now. This is going to be what you need. And so I did. And so then as they, and then I began to tell little fibs. I don't know if you and I talked about this when we talked before, but in those days, first of all, you didn't tell people you had children. If you were a professional,
you were working, yeah.
You didn't, because it was assumed that you weren't serious, that you weren't really professional. So, and I don't even remember how I put together, my sister probably loaned me stuff to put together a wardrobe and to look okay, here I am living in this camping trailer when it wasn't even a camping trailer like we have now. It was little pop-up canvas thing, that was just, but it was a bed and it was warmth. And then I think we must have used her bathrooms in her house. So we came up with this little ruse, my sister and I. She had a solar energy company with her husband at the time. And so I started looking around at the newspapers and the directories at what advertising agencies were in the area. And I went to and I looked at the ones that I thought looked like they had their act together. And I went to them on the pretense of finding an advertising agency for this company of my sister and her husband.
Okay.
They didn't need an advertising agency, but I would go and say that, yes, this is, and I would meet these people and I would talk with them. And they'd say, well, so how did you land here from North Carolina? And do you do creative? Well, yes, I do. I do creative work. What do you do? Well, I'm a writer. Could you write for us? Would you write for? Because at the time, Silicon Valley was crazy. It was just exploding, but they didn't have creative people. They had engineers. They didn't have advertising
creative
of people.
Yeah.
No. And so I'd be like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do that.
Not? Yeah.
Why not? And so pretty soon I had 2 or 3 clients and the money was really good compared to what I had been making. Silicon Valley, they're throwing money at stuff. Yeah, she's a woman, but hey, she can do this.
She can do that. I mean,
yeah.
You were there and you had managed to find your first job in California, in Silicon Valley, on your own as a woman with 3 children, but that had to go through kind of a rough time. And I mean, actually,
it got rougher, V, because my soon to be ex, realized that we weren't coming back. Yeah. And he followed us to California. He had a detective follow me and also, the only thing that made it okay for him was making up a story for himself that there must be some guy involved. I must, whatever. It wasn't because of him. So it actually was the beginning of a number of years of him deteriorating further and blaming it on me. And of course, he knew how to use weapons and he kind of went back into battle mode. And so, and it's a long story, but ending with him taking his own life, which I figured he probably would. What I was determined to do was to not have the children be there, not have my children find him if possible, to be the ones who had to see that.
How did you manage not to crumble under the weight of all this? I mean, mentally, he had some problems, but you had to live with all this going on. How did you do
I think a couple of things. I think I had a good upbringing, good parents that never told me I couldn't, as best they could. And I was the youngest child, so I had a bit of a feral upbringing. So, and then the other thing, Beat, is, the mama bear legend. It's true. When you are the mother of small beings who need you, there's a power that comes to you that you don't even understand, that you don't know you have. And when you need that strength, you have that strength, and you would be amazed at what you can do and will do when a child's life and future is at stake.
Lynne, what would you say and what would your advice be for a woman struggling with the same kind of situation, or a man, for as much as it is?
Well, and no 2 situations are the same. I mean, they're always different factors. But the first thing is, it's not your fault. I don't care what he's told you. I don't care what anyone's told you. Just put that aside. And if you have children, especially, those are the people who need to be number 1 right now. Get the help you need. Get help. And keep asking until you get it. In my case, it was my sister. If you don't have a sister, a friend, an institution, a church.
True.
But there are so many people out there willing to help and with the education to help you.
People around you.
The good news is when you've been through all that, everything else seems like a breeze.
With all this, the kind of new insights that you've got through such a difficult period, and the fact that you had to get out, but in a way somebody helped you, your sister, to get out of that. Now we are moving fast forward a few years. Now you are on your own path to give back to other people, because I think you are on a really interesting project.
Thank you very much. I think you're referring to my new book, which is called Brownies for Breakfast. It's not my only book, but it's my special new baby right now. I'm having a great time talking to people about this because the title, Brownies for Breakfast, the subtitle is A Cookbook for Diabetics and the People Who Love Them. I am a diabetic. I have been diabetic since I was in my 40s, type 2 diabetes.
Cool.
And my message, the overall message is not only can you live through this as these other things, but you can benefit from it. And now I'm 75. I'm mean as a snake. I'm having a blast podcasting, meeting new people, doing fun things. I'm a grandma. I have a new grandson who is 7 weeks old now.
Oh my God.
And which so worth living for. All of this so worth living for. And so my message is, if you are diabetic, if you've been diagnosed, or if you're thinking about becoming a diabetic or might be diagnosed, or if you have any kind of a chronic disease, this book is for you. It's very basic about how to make the transition to healthy, how to stop eating crap. And I know you are out there. I know I see all y'all out there. Your cars. I know what you're doing. I'm a granny. I know stuff. So it's a book about how you can make brownies and pies and cakes and macaroni and cheese and all this wonderful, typically American food.
Yeah.
But if you make it with the right stuff, it's great for you. That's all. Just don't eat crap. Eat good food. Whole food, plant-based eating. And you will be way healthier.
Yeah. And that definitely relates back to being happier and healthier for a longer period of time. And I mean that actually what you give to people, Lynne, it's a gift. It's a blessing.
The guy that you go to, the person that you go to for your heart disease or for your diabetes, they're not nutritionists. They don't really think about food a great deal. They're going to help you with your symptoms. But the only way to get really healthy is to change what you're eating and what you're doing. And you can reverse disease, absolutely, by changing how you're eating and what you're doing.
And with this, I want to thank you so much for your story. And once again, it's so inspiring to listen.
Thank you. I hate to say goodbye.
I know, but we're gonna meet again. So
yes, we are.
Thank you, Lynne, for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. This was Lynne's story. Lynne started her family in the 70s, and while being married to her first husband, she realized he had been scared emotionally by having fought in the Vietnam War. Fleeing seemed to be the only way out, and therefore she decided to grab her children and leave her old life behind to start thriving again. Nowadays, Lynne is a proud grandma, and she has recently published her book Brownies for Breakfast, with a series of recipes meant for diabetic people with the goal of helping people living healthier. This was the end of this episode. Have you ever had the chance to change your life, or do you know anybody who has? Please get in touch with us and leave a comment here below. And if you have enjoyed this episode, do not forget to like and subscribe to this channel, and see you next time. Give me a chance on your screen and in your ears.